Hey, what's up, folks? Today I'm going to talk about two classic sci fi franchises which I've been a long time fan of: Terminator and The Matrix, especially comparing their latest installments, Terminator Dark Fate and The Matrix Resurrections. I just thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about these two films together since they were both box office flops at the time. Both of them are considered to be complete misfires and even franchise killers by a lot of fans and critics. And I just wanted to look at the pros and cons of each film, look at what went wrong, and also see if there's any path forward for the franchise and the series. So, with that said, let's get right into it here. By the way, I will be getting into spoiler territory here, so if you haven't seen these movies, that's your warning now. Alright, let's begin by talking about Terminator Dark Fate, which was released in 2019 and intended as a direct sequel to the first Terminator, as well as T2 Judgment Day, ignoring all the other installments. We also have Tim Miller replacing James Cameron as director, but we also have James Cameron returning to co-write this new story. And we have a lot of the original cast coming back to reprise their iconic roles, such as Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, coming back as the T-800, and even Edward Furlong coming back as John Connor. Already, this new film is showing a lot of promise and potential, so honestly, what could go wrong? Well, let's look at the opening scene of this movie, which threw off a lot of people because it kicks off the main plot by killing John Connor. And so we get a very brief cameo with Edward Furlong back as a younger John Connor, only to be killed off by a T-800. First of all, I found the de-aging effects for the characters really bad and distracting, including those for Sarah Connor as well as the T-800. It just looked really fake and forced. On top of that, the creative choice to have this all go down in a brightly lit sunny beachside setting with those oversaturated colors and the bright lighting. And speaking of the lighting, it just made those corny de-aging effects look that much more artificial looking. So all those elements, from the locale to the effects, just took me out of what was supposed to be a very dramatic, intense moment, which should hit you like a gut punch, but instead just left me not caring and feeling kind of coldly detached from it all. This plot twist of John Connor's death essentially rewrites the entire Terminator lore. So we don't have the Skynet human machine war timeline now. We have a different one, very similar one though, involving a new resistance leader, Danny Ramos, who becomes the new resistance leader in an alternate timeline. And she is combating and fighting against essentially a similar threat as Skynet, but here it's called Legion. We do get some cool new characters such as Grace, played by Mackenzie Davis, and the new Terminator killer, Rev 9, played by Gabrielle Luna, very much invoking Robert Patrick's performance as the T-1000. And then there's Carl, the T-800, who's now living as a curtain-selling family man. Gotta be honest, it was kind of a blow to see Schwarzenegger's robotic killer getting a makeover as a remorseful dad. And the film really just uses his character for awkward comic relief, and then also throws in these nostalgic catchphrases at odd times that just land with a dull thud. Now, one of the kind of new concepts introduced into the Terminator lore here was the fact that Carl can age naturally in time, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, I know that James Cameron has addressed this issue and explained that the Terminators, the T-800s, use living tissue and skin, and that gives a reason for why they can age organically like humans. But I still have to ask the question, would Carl here age naturally into a silver fox, because he is still part machine, and I would think that machine component would affect his aging process, that it wouldn't be organic or completely natural as a human. You know, the concept and the storytelling as a result was limited by that fact that you wanted those actors back in those roles. And my own personal opinion here is that Schwarzenegger probably should have retired as that character after Terminator 3. Terminator Dark Fate is a misfire. I agree with that. It does use nostalgia as a crutch to compensate for the lack of vision and storytelling here, wanting so bad to be as great as those originals that it fails to stand alone, ultimately repeating and copying beat by beat the entire playbook of Terminator 2 and ended up being just kind of a shoddy copy and paste job of that movie. I'm not interested in seeing any of these characters continue, except for maybe perhaps the Grace character, because I think that kind of cyberpunk human machine integration that they bring to the table through her character is a great addition to the Terminator lore, and I would be interested to explore that further. Now, let's talk about The Matrix Resurrections, which came out in 2021. Directed by Lana Wachowski. So the first in the series that wasn't directed by both Wachowski sisters. The Matrix Resurrections is definitely more of an intentional meta sequel. In the opening act, Neo is back, living as game designer Thomas Anderson, haunted by memories that have been rebranded as dreams or perhaps video game fiction. The movie goes full self-awareness, mocking Warner Brothers for demanding sequels and even joking about reboots, bullet time, and fan expectations. This kind of self-referential humor is kind of clever at first, although I did find it becoming a bit tiresome as the movie continues, especially when we get to this pitch meeting with Neo and his fellow game designers who are just tossing out ideas about what the new Matrix game should be. And at that point, it just felt too much like an SNL skit and verging on self-parody, which, listen, I know was intentional, but the humor here just felt too topical and too much of a reflection of the fact that the Wachowski sisters just did not want to make a sequel here and were compelled by the studio Warner Brothers to make one. That said, The Matrix Resurrection still has some good ideas. The introduction of Io, a city where humans and machines live together peacefully, feels like an organic evolution of the Matrix lore, proof that new ground can be explored here. You do have some good world building here, but when you get to the action scenes, they have diminishing returns. Missing here is a lot of that fun wire work, intensity, and tactile choreography that we got from the original trilogy. Instead, we get Neo doing force pushes on repeat. So what begins as an emotional reunion between Neo and Trinity becomes just a visual redundancy, the same beats, the same power over and over again. And then we get to the recasting of Morpheus. Abdul Mateen is a fine actor, but his version of Morpheus just feels unnecessary. Only there as a symbolic gesture rather than a functional character. It's the same with Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith. It's a fine performance, but ultimately felt like a distraction for me. Unlike Dark Fate, Matrix Resurrections has some great, interesting ideas, like I said, commentary on reality, on nostalgia, and corporate sequel culture, but it gets lost in its own echo chamber of self-reference. Begs the question, why does this film even exist if the creators just felt it to be this cold corporate studio obligation? So to wrap up here, I think the common thread here in both Dark Fate and Resurrections is that there are just no consequences, and they both suffer from this modern trend of multiverses and fractured timelines that just allows the creators to fix the past by retconning it. In theory, multiverses are great, in the way they allow this kind of creative freedom. However, in execution, they just often strip the storytelling of any stakes. So if John Connor can die and be replaced in a new timeline, if Neo and Trinity can just be rebooted and resurrected by machines, then what are we actually invested in here? There's no fear of loss, no permanence, just another version of the same story with slightly different faces and upgraded effects. So are Dark Fate and Resurrections franchise killers? Well, I think Dark Fate really retconned the soul of the original movies, offered nothing new, and just almost relied on limp nostalgia to carry its weight. However, The Matrix Resurrections, although flawed and overly meta, it does have good ideas. It just doesn't commit to them. So I don't think it kills the Matrix franchise. It just kind of leaves it a bit in creative limbo here. All right, that's a wrap. Please don't hesitate to share your comments and reflections below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next video here.